People clutched their purses when they saw him running. But this 11-year-old boy didn't care. He had seconds to save a pregnant woman's life. The next morning, bank executives knocked on his door. The morning sun hit the tall buildings of Manhattan, creating long shadows on the busy streets. Jordan walked past the fancy stores, his worn sneakers scraping against the concrete. He was tall for 11, his orange t-shirt clean but faded, his jeans showing slight wear at the knees. "Be safe, baby." His mom's words from earlier that morning echoed in his head. "I got an extra shift today. There's leftover spaghetti in the fridge." He'd watch her rush out the door of their small Bronx apartment, her cleaning uniform already on, her tired eyes trying to hide her worry. The rent was due next week. Now, walking through these rich streets, Jordan kept his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. A woman in a business suit clutched her purse tighter as she passed him. He pretended not to notice, like always. "Man, I don't need a new phone anyway," he muttered to himself, passing an electronics store with the latest smartphones on display. A group of kids his age pressed their faces against the glass, chattering excitedly about features and prices. His own phone was a basic flip model his mom had bought secondhand. "It makes calls, baby. That's what matters," she'd said. Jordan knew better than to ask for more. The street got busier as he approached Times Square. Men in suits rushed past, coffee cups in hand. Women in high heels clicked by, talking rapidly into wireless earbuds. Jordan kept to the edge of the sidewalk, making himself small. "Watch it, kid." A businessman bumped into him, not even looking back. Jordan steadied himself, his heart beating faster. He hated how his body tensed up every time someone got too close. His mom said it was because of what happened with his dad, but Jordan didn't want to think about that. 3 years ago, his dad had walked out the door, promising to come back with ice cream. Jordan had waited by the window until midnight. His mom had held him as he cried, whispering, "Sometimes people leave, baby. But I'm here. I'll always be here." A family walked past, mom, dad, 2 kids, all of them laughing, the father carrying shopping bags from expensive stores. Jordan looked away. "Excuse me," a soft voice said. Jordan looked up to see an elderly woman trying to read a street sign. "Is this the way to Central Park?" Before Jordan could answer, a man in a suit cut in. "Ma'am, let me help you with that." He shot Jordan a suspicious look. Jordan kept walking, his jaw tight. He was used to it, the looks, the assumptions, the way people crossed the street when they saw him coming. His mom said it wasn't right, but it was what it was. The sidewalk widened as he turned onto a less crowded street. Here, the buildings were older, their stone facades weathered. Jordan liked these quieter blocks where fewer people meant fewer stairs. A construction crew worked on the corner, their yellow helmets bobbing as they examined something in the street. Jordan watched them place orange cones around a manhole cover. "That one's loose," one worker said to another. "We'll fix it tomorrow." "Should we block it off completely?" the second worker asked. "No, it's fine. Just don't step on the edge, and you're good." Jordan frowned, watching them walk away. The manhole cover sat there, slightly askew, its edge lifted maybe an inch off the ground. People walked around it, some stepping over it without a second glance. A group of teenagers approached, all looking at their phones. One girl's foot came close to the edge of the cover. Jordan held his breath, but she stepped over it at the last second. "Hey," he called out softly, then louder. "Hey, be careful, Dash." A woman pulling a shopping cart cut him off, hurrying past. Nobody looked at him. Or rather, they looked through him, the way they always did unless they thought he was up to something. Jordan stood there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The manhole cover moved slightly as a truck rumbled past. Someone could fall. Someone could get hurt. He looked around for the construction workers, but they were gone. A police officer stood at the corner, but Jordan's stomach tightened at the thought of approaching him. Last month, a cop had followed him through a store, hand on his gun, just because Jordan had been looking at the candy section too long. More people streamed past. A kid on a skateboard, an old man with a cane, a woman talking rapidly in Spanish on her phone. Jordan watched them all navigate around or over the hazard, his anxiety growing with each near miss. Then he saw her. A pregnant woman in a white dress with red flowers walked slowly down the street, one hand on her belly, the other holding her phone to her ear. She was looking down at her feet, careful with each step, but her attention was on her conversation. "Yes, I'll be there in 10 minutes, she was saying. "The meeting can't start without me anyway." She was headed straight for the manhole cover. Jordan's heart jumped into his throat. The woman was maybe 20 feet away now, still talking, still not looking up. 15 feet. 10 feet. "Ma'am," he called out, but his voice cracked. A bus roared past, drowning out his words. The woman was 5 feet from the manhole now. Jordan saw her next step would land right on the loose edge. His body tensed. People around him were starting to notice him. A black kid in a worn orange t-shirt, looking agitated on a Manhattan street. A man in a suit took a step back. A woman grabbed her daughter's hand and pulled her closer. The pregnant woman was 2 steps away now. 1 step. Jordan's mom's voice echoed in his head. "Do what's right, baby. No matter what people think." His feet started moving before his brain could catch up. "Watch out," he yelled, louder this time. "Stop." Heads turned. The police officer at the corner looked over sharply. And the pregnant woman, her phone still at her ear, took that final step toward the loose manhole cover, completely unaware of the danger beneath her feet. Jordan ran. People's reactions happened in slow motion. A woman clutched her designer purse. A man in a suit pulled out his phone, finger hovering over the emergency call button. The police officer's hand moved to his belt. Jordan saw it all as he ran, his worn sneakers slapping against the concrete. The pregnant woman took another step, her heel hovering over the loose manhole cover. "Hey!" Jordan's voice cracked again. "Lady, stop!" His mom's words from last week rang in his head. They'd been watching the news about another black boy getting hurt because someone thought he was dangerous. "Baby," she'd said, wiping dishes with shaking hands, "sometimes people will think the worst of you. But you keep your head high. You know who you are." The pregnant woman glanced up at his shout, her eyes widening with alarm. She took a step back, clutching her phone tighter. "Security," she called out. A guard from the nearby bank building started moving toward them. He was big, with broad shoulders stretching his blue uniform. "Hey, kid, stop right there." Jordan's legs felt like lead. Every lesson about staying safe, about not drawing attention, about keeping his head down, they all screamed at him to stop. 2 days ago, a store clerk had followed him through the aisles, watching his every move. "Just making sure," the clerk had said when Jordan's mom confronted him. "You understand." The pregnant woman was looking at her phone again, stepping backward. Her heel caught the edge of the loose cover. "Please." Jordan's voice broke. "The manhole, it's loose." More people were staring now. A crowd gathered, phones coming up to record. Jordan heard whispers. "What's he doing? Somebody stop him. That poor woman." The security guard was closer now, his walkie-talkie crackling. "Ma'am, step away from the boy. I'll handle this." The pregnant woman looked confused, glancing between Jordan and the guard. She took another step back, her foot landing right on the edge of the cover. Metal scraped against concrete. The cover shifted. "No!" Jordan lunged forward. The guard broke into a run. "Stop right there!" A woman screamed. Someone shouted, "He's going to push her." Jordan's mind flashed to his mom again. Last night, counting bills at the kitchen table, circles under her eyes. "We'll be okay, baby. We always are." What if they arrested him? What if this went wrong? What would happen to his mom? The pregnant woman's heel slipped. The manhole cover tilted. Jordan made his choice. He darted past a businessman who tried to grab him, dodged around a woman who swung her purse at him. The guard was 3 steps away, reaching for him. The pregnant woman started to scream as the cover shifted under her weight. Her arms windmilled, phone clattering to the ground. Her other foot slipped off the edge. Jordan crashed into her, wrapping his arms around her waist. They stumbled backward together, away from the opening manhole. His momentum carried them several steps before they stopped, both breathing hard. The woman's hands gripped his shoulders. She stared at him, then at the manhole cover that now lay sideways, revealing the dark hole beneath. "Oh my God," she whispered. The security guard reached them, grabbing Jordan's arm. "Let her go, kid. Wait." The woman's voice was sharp. "Wait. He saved me." The crowd pressed closer. Jordan could feel his heart trying to break out of his chest. The guard's hand was tight on his arm. "Ma'am?" The guard sounded uncertain. The woman looked at the hole in the ground, then back at Jordan. Her hands were shaking. If he hadn't. Jordan tried to step back, but the guard held firm. I saw it was loose, he said quietly. The construction guys said they'd fix it tomorrow. I tried to warn you, but nobody would listen to a black kid running down the street, the woman finished. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. We all thought. The guard's grip loosened. Around them, the crowd's murmurs changed tone. Did you see that? He actually saved her. And she's pregnant. The police officer pushed through the crowd. Jordan's stomach clenched, but the woman stepped in front of him. Officer, she said firmly, one hand on her belly, the other reaching back to hold Jordan's shoulder. This young man just saved my life. And my baby's life. The officer looked at the open manhole, then at Jordan. His hand moved away from his belt. A construction worker jogged up, out of breath. We just got called about a loose. Oh man, he saw the hole. We were going to fix that tomorrow. Kid, did you? Jordan nodded, his throat tight. The woman's hand was warm on his shoulder. I'm Mrs. Martinez, she said softly, turning to face him. What's your name, sweetheart? Jordan, he managed to say. Jordan Taylor. Jordan Taylor, she repeated, wiping her eyes. I work at the bank right there. I was heading to a meeting about community outreach of all things. And here you are, teaching us all a lesson about assumptions and courage. The crowd was taking pictures now, but differently. Not suspicious videos of a potential crime, but photos of a hero. Jordan saw phones typing, sharing, spreading the story. The security guard cleared his throat. Kid, I'm sorry. You did good. Jordan just nodded again. His legs felt wobbly. All he could think about was his mom. What would she say? Would she be proud? Or scared about how close he'd come to trouble? Mrs. Martinez was still talking, telling the police officer exactly what happened. The construction worker was placing barriers around the hole, shooting apologetic looks at everyone. My boss needs to hear about this, Mrs. Martinez said suddenly. The whole bank needs to hear about this. Jordan, where do you live? Can I speak with your parents? Before Jordan could answer, a news van pulled up. A reporter jumped out, camera crew following. Is this where the incident happened? The reporter asked, microphone ready. We got calls about a young hero. Jordan took a step back. Mrs. Martinez squeezed his shoulder. It's okay, she said. Let's tell them what really happened. Let's make sure everyone knows what kind of young man you are. The news camera's red light blinked on. Jordan felt sweat beading on his forehead under the bright sun. Mrs. Martinez kept her hand on his shoulder, steady and warm. I'm here at the corner of 42nd Street, the reporter said in her microphone, where moments ago an extraordinary act of heroism unfolded. With me are Mrs. Elena Martinez and young Jordan Taylor. Jordan, can you tell us what happened? Jordan's mouth went dry. The crowd had grown larger, phones still recording. The construction workers were securing the area around the manhole, their orange vests bright against the gray concrete. His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. I just saw it was dangerous. Mrs. Martinez stepped in. This brave young man saw me about to step on a loose manhole cover. When no one would listen to his warnings, he ran to save me, despite. She paused, her voice thick. Despite everyone assuming the worst about his intentions. The reporter turned back to Jordan. What made you act, Jordan? Weren't you afraid of how people might react? Jordan thought about his mom, about all her lectures on staying safe, keeping his head down. But he also remembered other talks, quiet ones late at night. My mom always says do what's right, he said softly. No matter what. The security guard stepped forward, surprising everyone. I need to say something. He looked directly into the camera. I was wrong. I saw this kid running and made assumptions. But he's a hero. Plain and simple. More people from the crowd started speaking up. I was right there. He tried to warn everyone. That hole was definitely loose. Could have been really bad. Kid's got guts. Mrs. Martinez touched her belly, taking a deep breath. I'm 8 months pregnant. If I had fallen, she wiped her eyes. Jordan, you didn't just save me. You saved my baby. The reporter asked more questions. About Jordan's age, where he lived, his school. He answered quietly, still stunned by how quickly everything had changed. 11 years old, the reporter marveled. A young hero from the Bronx? Suddenly, a voice cut through the crowd. Jordan. He turned to see his mom pushing through the people gathered around. She was still in her cleaning uniform, face scared and confused. Mrs. Taylor? The building manager where she worked followed behind her. I just saw it on the news. I had to tell you. Jordan's mom reached him, grabbing his shoulders. Baby, what happened? Are you okay? Ma'am, Mrs. Martinez stepped forward. Your son is more than okay. He's a hero. The next few minutes blurred together. His mom listening to the story, her hands shaking. The reporter asking for her reaction. The construction foreman apologizing about the loose cover. More news vans arriving. Mrs. Taylor, Mrs. Martinez said quietly while cameras filmed the police putting up barriers. I'm a vice president at First Manhattan Bank. We need to talk about your son. Jordan's mom straightened up, protective. My son? Not here. Mrs. Martinez glanced at the growing media circus. Can we meet tomorrow? At your home? Perhaps? Before his mom could answer, another voice rang out. Jordan. Hey, Jordan. Marcus from his building ran up, phone in hand. Man, you're all over Twitter. Everyone's sharing the video. More kids from the neighborhood appeared. Jordan recognized them from school, from the basketball court. Kids who usually didn't talk to him, too busy with their smartphones and brand-name clothes. Is it true? A girl named Tasha asked. Did you really save a lady from falling in a hole? Back up, back up. The police officer waved the growing crowd away. Give them some space. Jordan's mom pulled him close. He could feel her heart racing. I was so scared when I saw you on the news, she whispered. But baby, I'm so proud of you. Mrs. Martinez exchanged numbers with his mom. The reporter wrapped up her story. The construction crew finished securing the area. Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. We'll come by tomorrow morning, Mrs. Martinez said. Around 9? There's something important we need to discuss. Jordan's mom nodded, still holding him tight. We'll be there. As they walked home, people on the street started recognizing them. A fruit vendor handed Jordan an apple, refusing payment. A woman stopped her car to roll down the window and say thank you. His phone buzzed with messages from classmates who'd seen the news. Mom, Jordan said quietly as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. Are you mad? She stopped, turning to look at him. Mad? Baby, you did exactly what I always taught you. You did what was right. She touched his cheek. But I saw how those people looked at you at first. How they assume. It breaks my heart. I was scared, he admitted. But I couldn't let her fall. They reached their floor. Mr. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor, opened his door. I saw it on the news, he called out. Jordan, you're a hero. Inside their small apartment, Jordan's mom went straight to the kitchen. You need to eat. It's been a big day. But her hands were shaking as she opened the fridge. Jordan stepped forward, hugging her from behind. She turned, wrapping her arms around him. My brave boy, she whispered. My brave, brave boy. They stayed like that for a long time, the sounds of the city drifting in through the open window. Police sirens, car horns, a plane overhead, the normal sounds of their Bronx neighborhood. But something had changed. Jordan could feel it in the air, in the way his phone kept buzzing with messages, in the pride shining through his mom's tears. Tomorrow, bank executives would come to their small apartment. But tonight, they just held each other, a single mom and her son who'd chosen to do what was right, no matter what anyone thought. The next morning arrived with a golden sunrise over the Bronx. Jordan sat at their small kitchen table, picking at his cereal. His mom had already changed her uniform 3 times. Maybe I should wear the blue one instead, she muttered, smoothing down her dress. The doorbell rang. Both of them jumped. That's them, his mom said, checking the clock. 9 exactly. Jordan followed her to the door. When she opened it, Mrs. Martinez stood there in a crisp business suit, 2 men in expensive suits beside her. She held a leather briefcase. Mrs. Taylor, Jordan, she smiled. May we come in? Of course, of course. His mom stepped back, quickly gathering some magazines from the couch. Please sit down. I'm Thomas Chun, CEO of First Manhattan Bank, one of the men said, extending his hand. And this is Marcus Williams, our head of community relations. Jordan watched his mom shake their hands, her cleaning calluses standing out against their manicured fingers. Mrs. Martinez sat next to him on the couch. "How are you feeling today?" she asked softly. "Okay," Jordan shrugged. "Lots of messages on my phone. I'm not surprised." Mr. Chin leaned forward. "Your story has gone viral, Jordan. Do you know what that means? Everyone's sharing it online?" "Exactly. And do you know why?" Jordan shifted uncomfortably. "Because I helped Mrs. Martinez?" "Because you showed extraordinary character," Mr. Williams spoke up. "In a moment when most adults would hesitate, you acted. Despite the prejudice you faced, despite the risk to yourself, you did the right thing." His mom made a small sound, something between pride and pain. Mrs. Martinez opened her briefcase. "That's why we're here. Jordan, Mrs. Taylor, we want to help secure your future." She pulled out some papers. Mr. Chun cleared his throat. First Manhattan Bank is establishing a full scholarship fund in Jordan's name. It will cover his entire education, private school, college, even graduate school, if he chooses. Jordan's mom gasped. "What?" "Additionally," Mr. Williams added, "we'd like to offer you a position at the bank, Mrs. Taylor. Administrative assistant to our executive team. Full benefits, including health insurance and retirement plan." The room spun. Jordan grabbed the couch cushion to steady himself. I don't understand," his mom whispered. "We believe in investing in our community," Mrs. Martinez said. "And yesterday, your son showed us exactly who we should be investing in." A phone buzzed. Mr. Chin checked his. "The press release is going out now. We're announcing the Jordan Taylor Scholarship Fund, not just for Jordan, but for other promising students from underserved communities." And Mrs. Martinez touched Jordan's hand. "We'd like you to help select future recipients, if you're willing. Your voice matters." His mom started crying. Not the quiet tears Jordan was used to seeing when bills came, but deep, relieved sobs. Mr. Williams handed her a tissue. "There's more. We've arranged for—" The doorbell rang again. "Ah," Mrs. Martinez smiled. "Right on time?" Jordan opened the door. A tall man in a tailored suit stood there, holding a garment bag. "I'm Michael from Brooks Brothers," he said. "I'm here to fit the young man for his new wardrobe." The next hour passed in a blur. Michael measuring him while the executives discussed details. His mom signing papers with shaking hands. Mrs. Martinez explaining about press conferences and interviews. "We'll handle all media requests," Mr. Williams assured them. "You won't have to deal with reporters alone." "In the apartment?" his mom asked quietly. "All taken care of," Mr. Chin nodded. "The lease is paid for the next year while you look for a new place. Somewhere closer to the bank and Jordan's new school. New clothes. New school. New home." Jordan felt dizzy. "What if—" he started then stopped. "What is it, sweetheart?" Mrs. Martinez encouraged. "What if I'm not smart enough? For the private school?" The adults exchanged looks. His mom reached for his hand. "Jordan," Mrs. Martinez said firmly, "yesterday you showed better judgment than most grown-ups. You assessed a dangerous situation, tried multiple ways to warn people, and when that failed, you acted decisively. That's intelligence. That's leadership. And if you need tutoring, that's covered too," Mr. Williams added. "We want you to succeed, Jordan. We believe in you." A knock at the door made everyone turn. Mr. Rodriguez stood there, beaming. "Sorry to interrupt, but have you seen the news? Channel 7 is doing a whole segment." They turned on the small TV. Jordan's face filled the screen, then footage from yesterday. The reporter was interviewing witnesses. He didn't hesitate, the security guard was saying. He saw danger, and he acted. "We could all learn from this kid. My son has his poster on his wall already," a woman said. "He says he wants to be brave like Jordan." The CEO smiled. "Looks like you're a role model now." Jordan watched himself on TV, hardly recognizing the boy everyone was calling a hero. He looked at his mom, saw her watching the screen with tears and pride. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Martinez said softly. "Jordan, would you come with me to the bank next week? There's a kids program about financial literacy. I think the children would love to hear your story." "You want me to speak? To kids?" "Yes. Your voice matters now. You can help change how people think, how they judge others." His mom squeezed his hand. "You don't have to decide right now, baby." But Jordan thought about other kids like him, facing the same prejudices, the same assumptions. "I'll do it," he said. "I want to help." Mrs. Martinez hugged him. The executive shook his hand. Michael promised to return with the clothes tomorrow. After they left, Jordan and his mom sat on the couch, stunned. "Baby," she whispered, "do you understand what just happened?" Jordan looked at the papers on the table. His future, written in legal terms he couldn't understand yet. "Yeah," he said. "I think I do." His phone buzzed again. More messages. More people sharing his story. "Mom?" "Yes, baby? I'm glad I didn't listen to all those people yesterday. I'm glad I just did what was right." She pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "That's who you are, Jordan Taylor. That's who you've always been." The morning sun streamed through the windows of First Manhattan Bank's lobby. Jordan tugged at his new blue button-down shirt, still stiff with department store creases. His mom stood beside him in her new business suit, employee badge glinting at her hip. "You look handsome, baby," she whispered, smoothing his collar. Security guards nodded as they passed. Nothing like the suspicious glances of last week. One even smiled, touching his cap. "Morning, Jordan." "Mrs. Taylor." Mrs. Martinez met them at the elevator, her pregnancy more noticeable in her fitted dress. "Ready for your first speaking engagement?" Jordan's stomach churned. Through the lobby's glass walls, he could see news vans parking outside. A week had passed since the incident, but the media attention hadn't died down. "There's a lot of people," he mumbled. "Just tell them what happened." Mrs. Martinez squeezed his shoulder. "Like you told me?" The elevator opened onto a large conference room. About 30 kids sat in chairs, all around Jordan's age. Their parents stood along the walls, phones ready to record. "Look, it's him. That's the Manhole kid. My dad showed me the video." Mr. Williams stood at the podium, waiting for quiet. "Today, we're honored to have Jordan Taylor speak to us about courage, judgment, and doing what's right." Jordan walked to the front, his new dress shoes clicking on the polished floor. His note card shook in his hand. Hi, he started. "I'm Jordan." A girl in the front row raised her hand immediately. "Were you scared when you saw the manhole?" "Not of the manhole," Jordan said honestly. "I was scared people wouldn't believe me, that they'd think I was trying to cause trouble." "Because you're black?" a boy asked bluntly. The adults in the room shifted uncomfortably, but Jordan nodded. "Yeah, people make assumptions sometimes. But my mom always taught me to do what's right anyway." "Did you think you might get in trouble?" another kid asked. "I knew I might." But Mrs. Martinez was in danger. Her baby was in danger. That was more important. Mrs. Martinez stepped forward. Jordan tried to warn people first. He called out, tried to get attention. When no one listened, he acted. Like a superhero, a small voice called from the back. Jordan shook his head. Not a superhero. Just a kid who saw someone needed help. More hands shot up. Questions poured out. "Do you feel different now? Are you going to our school? Can I take a picture with you?" Mr. Williams intervened. "One at a time, please." "Jordan, would you tell us what happened after? How did people's attitudes change?" Jordan thought about it. The same people who were scared of me. They saw me differently. But I was the same person, just trying to help. His mom wiped her eyes in the back. A reporter scribbled notes furiously. "That's the lesson," Mrs. Martinez said. "We're launching the Jordan Taylor Initiative not just to provide scholarships, but to challenge assumptions, to remind everyone to look deeper." A small boy raised his hand. "My dad says you're brave. He says we should all be more like you." Jordan felt his face heat up. "I just want people to give each other a chance, to not judge so quick." The questions continued for an hour. Jordan relaxed as he spoke, finding his voice. He talked about his mom working multiple jobs, about feeling invisible on Manhattan streets until he did something dramatic. "But you shouldn't have to save someone to be seen," he said. "Everyone deserves respect." After the formal presentation, kids crowded around him. Parents asked for photos. Jordan saw his mom talking with other adults, standing tall in her new role. "Jordan," Mrs. Martinez called him over. "Channel 7 wants to do a follow-up story. How do you feel about that?" He looked at his mom, who nodded encouragingly. "Will it help? Will it make people think differently?" "I believe it will," Mrs. Martinez said. "Your story is making people question their biases. That's powerful." The reporter approached, camera crew in tow. "Jordan, can you tell us about the changes in your life since last week?" He straightened his shoulders. The scholarship is amazing. My mom's new job is amazing. But the best part is seeing people change how they think. Like the security guard who thought I was trouble. Now he's one of my biggest supporters. And the manhole cover? Fixed, Jordan smiled. I check every morning on my way to school. But I also check people's faces now. More of them smile. More of them see me. The reporter turned to Mrs. Martinez. The bank's initiative is quite substantial. Why such a big investment? Because change requires action, she said firmly. Jordan showed us what real courage looks like. Now it's our turn to show courage in addressing systemic issues. Later, in the elevator heading home, Jordan's mom hugged him tight. You did so good, baby. So good. Mom, do you think it'll last? People seeing us differently? She was quiet for a moment. Change takes time. But you started something, Jordan. Something important. His phone buzzed. Another message from the security guard who tried to stop him. Great job today, kid. You're changing minds. Including mine. Outside, the streets of Manhattan felt different. People nodded as they passed. A hot dog vendor called out, Hey, hero. Jordan walked tall beside his mom. Not shrinking, not hiding. Tomorrow's the new school tour, she said. Nervous? A little, but he thought about the kids today, how they'd listen to him. I think it'll be okay. A woman passed them, then stopped and turned back. Excuse me, are you Jordan? The boy who saved that pregnant lady? He nodded. I just thank you. My daughter saw your story. She wrote about you for her school paper. About courage. His mom beamed. Jordan felt warmth spread through his chest. Just doing what's right, he said. But he knew now that sometimes doing what's right could change more than one moment. Sometimes it could start something bigger. They walked home together through the changing city, mother and son, stepping confidently into their new future. The lights in the TV studio were hot. Jordan sat in the plush interview chair, trying not to fidget in his new clothes. The morning show host, Sarah Chun, adjusted her earpiece. 3 minutes to air, a producer called out. Nervous? Sarah asked kindly. Jordan nodded, glancing at his mom and Mrs. Martinez in the wings. A little. Just be yourself, Sarah smiled. That's why people love your story. 60 seconds. Makeup artists rushed in for final touches. Jordan's collar got straightened. Someone powdered his forehead. And we're live in 5, 4, 3. The red camera light blinked on. Sarah turned to face it, perfect smile in place. Good morning, New York. Today we're joined by Jordan Taylor, the 11-year-old boy whose quick thinking and courage saved a pregnant woman from a potentially deadly fall. Jordan, welcome to the show. Thank you, Jordan said quietly. Tell us about that moment. What went through your mind when you saw Mrs. Martinez approaching the loose manhole cover? Jordan sat straighter, remembering Mrs. Martinez's coaching. I just knew I had to help. People weren't listening to my warnings, so I had to act, even though you knew how it might look. Yeah. Jordan met her eyes. People see a black kid running toward someone. They assume the worst. But my mom always taught me to do what's right anyway. In the wings, his mom wiped her eyes. Sarah leaned forward. Your story has gone viral. The video has millions of views. How has your life changed? It's different now. First Manhattan Bank gave me a scholarship. My mom has a new job. But the biggest change is how people see us. What do you mean? Jordan thought carefully. Before, people would cross the street when they saw me coming. Now, they stop to say hi. I'm the same person. They just see me different now. Sarah nodded. Mrs. Martinez, can you join us? Mrs. Martinez walked onto the set, settling carefully into the chair beside Jordan. Her pregnancy seemed more pronounced under the bright lights. The bank's response has been extraordinary, Sarah said. Tell us about the Jordan Taylor Initiative. We're committing $50 million to scholarships and community programs, Mrs. Martinez explained. Jordan showed us something important, that talent and character exist everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. We're changing that. The interview continued. Jordan relaxed as they talked about his new school, the changes in his neighborhood, the messages he'd received from around the world. A boy in Australia wrote to me, he said I helped him stand up to bullies. That feels good. After the show, they walked through Times Square. People pointed, took pictures. A group of tourists asked for selfies. You're getting good at this, his mom said proudly. Jordan's phone buzzed constantly now. His old flip phone replaced with a new smartphone. For safety, Mrs. Martinez had insisted. At NY0, this kid gives me hope. At Mom in Manhattan, my children watched his interview. Powerful message about judgment and courage. At Bronx Pride, Jordan Taylor showing the world what our community is made of. They stopped for hot dogs. His mom didn't hesitate now about spending money on lunch. As they ate, a small boy approached. Are you the Manhole hero? Jordan nodded, mouth full of hot dog. I saw you on TV. The boy twisted his hands nervously. Some kids at school make fun of me because I'm different. But you said do what's right anyway. Jordan swallowed hard. Yeah, it's not always easy. But it matters. The boy's mother appeared apologetic. I'm sorry to bother you. He begged to say hello. It's okay. Jordan's mom smiled. We're getting used to it. Back home, their apartment looked different too. New furniture from the bank. A desk for Jordan's schoolwork. His mom's work clothes hanging neatly instead of cleaning uniforms. Baby, she called from the kitchen. Principal Davis called. They want you to speak at assembly next week. Jordan flopped onto the new couch. Another speech? You're good at it. People listen to you now. That was true. Yesterday at the park, he'd seen two teenagers about to fight. He'd walked over, introduced himself. They'd stopped, asked for a picture instead. His phone buzzed again. Mrs. Martinez, Channel 12 wants an interview. Also, the mayor's office called. Interested? Jordan showed his mom the message. She sat beside him, running her fingers through his hair. It's a lot, isn't it? Yeah. He leaned against her. Sometimes I miss being invisible. You were never invisible, baby. People just weren't seeing right. A knock at the door. Mr. Rodriguez stood there with a newspaper. You're on the front page again. Young hero inspires city. My grandkids have your picture on their wall. Jordan thanked him, embarrassed but pleased. The article showed him in his new school uniform, standing tall. Oh, his mom remembered. The bank called. They're planning a ceremony for the scholarship announcement. Next month. Will there be cameras? Probably. But you don't have to dash. No, it's okay. Jordan straightened up. Like Mrs. Martinez says, it's important. Shows people shouldn't judge by how someone looks. His mom hugged him tight. When did you get so grown up? Had a good teacher? That night, Jordan stood at his window, looking out at the city. The same buildings, the same streets. But everything was different now. His phone lit up. A message from the security guard who'd tried to stop him. Kid, my daughter wrote a paper about you for school. Got an A+. Thanks for teaching an old man to look deeper. Jordan smiled, typing back. Just doing what's right. Because that's what it came down to. One moment, one choice. The right thing no matter what. The city lights twinkled, and somewhere out there, he knew someone else was facing a choice. Maybe his story would help them choose right too. The doorbell chimed early Monday morning. Jordan straightened his school tie, still not used to the private school uniform. His mom checked her makeup one last time, bank employee badge gleaming. Ready, she asked. Ready. They opened the door to find Mrs. Martinez, Mr. Chun, and a full camera crew in the hallway. The cameraman's light made the worn carpet look even shabbier. Big day. Mrs. Martinez smiled, rubbing her pregnant belly. First day at your new school. Mr. Chun held up a leather backpack. A small gift from the bank. For our scholarship program's first recipient. Jordan took the bag, feeling the soft leather. His old backpack, patched and worn, sat by the door. His mom picked it up, hands trembling slightly. Maybe we should keep this one, she said. As a reminder. Good idea. Mrs. Martinez nodded. Jordan, are you ready for your speech at the ceremony? Before he could answer, voices echoed up the stairwell. Their neighbors were gathering, phones out. Look at our boy, all dressed up. That uniform looks sharp, Jordan. Show them what the Bronx is made of. Mrs. Washington from 3B pushed forward with a Tupperware container. Made you cookies, baby. For luck. Jordan felt his eyes sting. Just 2 weeks ago, some of these same neighbors had hurried past without speaking. Now they were family. The camera crew captured it all. The hugs, the gifts, the proud faces. Mr. Chun checked his watch. The press is waiting at the school. We should go. Outside, a sleek black car waited. Not a taxi or an Uber, but a proper town car with a driver. Jordan's mom smoothed her skirt nervously. "First time in one of these," she whispered. The drive to Manhattan was surreal. They passed the spot where the manhole incident happened. Construction crews had replaced not just that cover, but everyone on the block. "Look," Mrs. Martinez pointed. Someone had placed flowers nearby with a sign, "Heroes come in all sizes." The car turned onto Park Avenue. Jordan's new school rose ahead, all brick and ivy. Students in matching uniforms climbed the steps. "Oh my God," his mom breathed. "Baby, are you sure?" "I'm sure, Mom." Jordan squeezed her hand. "We belong here now." Camera flashes greeted them as they stepped out. Reporters called questions. "Jordan, how do you feel?" "Mrs. Taylor, what's it like seeing your son here?" "Mrs. Martinez, tell us about the scholarship program." The school's headmaster, Dr. Roberts, met them at the steps. "Welcome to St. Andrews, Jordan. We're honored to have you." Inside the auditorium, students and parents filled the seats. Jordan recognized some faces from TV interviews and newspaper photos. The mayor sat in the front row. "Remember," Mrs. Martinez whispered, "just speak from your heart." Dr. Roberts approached the podium. "Today, we celebrate not just a new student, but a new chapter in our school's history. The Jordan Taylor Scholarship Program will ensure that talent and character always find a home here." Applause filled the room. Jordan stood, legs shaking slightly. "When I first met Jordan," Mr. Chin took the podium, "I saw what true courage looks like. Not just in saving Mrs. Martinez, but in defying expectations, in doing what's right despite the risks." More speeches followed. The mayor talked about city unity. Mrs. Martinez discussed community investment. Jordan's mom received a standing ovation just for being the woman who raised such a son. Finally, Jordan's turn came. He approached the podium, index cards clutched tight. "2 weeks ago, I was just a kid from the Bronx." His voice echoed in the quiet room. People saw what they expected to see. A threat. A problem. Someone to avoid. He looked at his mom, drawing strength from her smile. "But my mom taught me something important. She said character isn't about what people think of you. It's about what you do when it matters." The index cards shook less now. Words flowed easier. That day by the manhole, I had a choice. Let fear stop me, or do what's right. I chose right. And that choice changed everything. In the audience, phones recorded. Reporters scribbled. But Jordan focused on the students, kids his age, watching intently. But here's the thing, we all have those choices. Every day. To judge or understand. To help or turn away. To do what's easy or do what's right. Mrs. Martinez wiped her eyes. Mr. Chin nodded proudly. "This scholarship isn't just about me. It's about all the kids out there who need someone to look deeper. To see past assumptions. To give them a chance." His mom was crying now, but smiling too. "So yeah, I'm just a kid from the Bronx. And I'm proud of that. Proud to show that heroes don't look just one way. That courage comes in all colors. That character is about choices, not appearances." The applause started before he finished. It grew until the old walls seemed to shake. Students stood. Parents cheered. Even the reporters clapped. After, in the hallway, his new classmates surrounded him. "That was awesome. Can you sit with us at lunch? Will you join the debate team?" His mom hugged him tight. "You did it, baby. You really did it." Mrs. Martinez touched his shoulder. "Ready for your first class?" Jordan looked at his new backpack, his new uniform, his new school. Then at his mom in her business suit, standing tall. "Yeah," he smiled. "I'm ready." Because that's what life was about now. Being ready. Taking chances. Showing the world that one right choice could start a wave of change. 1 month after the manhole incident, Jordan stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie. The St. Andrews uniform still felt strange, but in a good way. His phone buzzed on the counter. Another message from Mrs. Martinez. "Ready for the big ceremony today." Before he could answer, his mom called from the kitchen. "Baby, come look at this." He found her at the table, newspapers spread out. Their picture filled half the page. Jordan in his uniform, his mom in her bank suit, both smiling in front of First Manhattan Bank. "Local hero sparks community change," she read. 1 month after Jordan Taylor saved a pregnant executive from a deadly fall, His story continues to inspire change across the city. Jordan grabbed a piece of toast, reading over her shoulder. The article detailed the bank's new initiatives, his scholarship program, community responses. But one paragraph made him stop chewing. Perhaps most remarkable is the ripple effect in Jordan's Bronx neighborhood. Local businesses report increased cooperation with police. Community watch programs have doubled. And most significantly, incidents of racial profiling have dropped dramatically. "Is that true?" he asked. His mom nodded. "Remember Mr. Johnson's store? He used to follow every black kid who walked in. Now he's hired 2 teenagers as clerks." The doorbell rang. Mrs. Martinez stood there, her pregnancy now in its final weeks. "Your fan club is waiting downstairs," she smiled. In the lobby, a group of kids from the neighborhood bounced excitedly. They all wore new backpacks, gifts from the bank's community program. "Jordan," little Marcus called, "we're going to be late for tutoring." The free tutoring program had been Mrs. Martinez's idea. 3 times a week, volunteers from the bank helped local kids with homework. Today was the program's official launch. Outside, news vans lined the street. The mayor's office had announced a citywide initiative based on the Jordan Taylor program. Funding for education, community policing reforms, anti-bias training. "Mr. Jordan," a reporter approached. "How does it feel seeing your actions create such change?" Before Jordan could answer, Officer Rodriguez stepped in. The same cop who'd once kept his hand on his gun around black kids now ran the neighborhood youth program. "Let the kid breathe," he smiled. "You can interview him at the ceremony." They walked to the community center as a group, Jordan, his mom, Mrs. Martinez, and 24 local kids. People waved from windows. A construction crew stopped work to clap. Inside the center, the change was obvious. New computers lined the walls. Fresh paint brightened the rooms. Bank volunteers in suits chatted with local parents. "Jordan," Mr. Chun waved from the podium. "Ready for your speech?" "Speech?" one of the younger kids asked. "You're going to talk in front of everyone again?" Jordan nodded. "About choices. About doing what's right." His phone buzzed again. A message from his new school's debate team captain. "Killed it at practice yesterday. You're opening next week's competition." Another buzz. The security guard from that day. "Hey kid, precinct wants you to speak at our training. Show cops what it's like from your side." And another. A student from Australia. "Your story helped me stand up to racist bullies." "Thank you." Places everyone. Mrs. Martinez called. The ceremony was starting. Jordan took his seat between his mom and Mrs. Martinez. The mayor spoke first, then Mr. Chun, then community leaders. Each mentioned how one boy's courage had sparked a movement. Finally, Jordan's turn came. He hadn't prepared note cards this time. Didn't need them anymore. "A month ago, I made a choice," he began. "A simple choice between walking away or helping someone in danger. I didn't know that choice would change everything." The room was silent, cameras rolling. "But here's what I've learned. Every choice matters." When Mr. Johnson chose to trust kids in his store instead of suspecting them, that mattered. When Officer Rodriguez chose to start the youth program, that mattered. When the bank chose to invest in our community, that mattered. His mom squeezed his hand. "Now look around. Look at these kids getting tutoring. Look at these volunteers giving their time. Look at this community coming together. All because people chose to see differently, to act differently, to be better." Mrs. Martinez rubbed her belly, smiling through tears. "Someone asked me if I feel like a hero. I don't. I feel like a kid who did what's right. And I see all these other people doing what's right too. That's the real story here." The applause was deafening. Kids rushed to hug him. Parents shook his hand. Reporters called questions. Later, walking home, his mom put her arm around him. "You know what the best part is?" she said. "What?" "You're still my Jordan. All this change, all this attention, it hasn't changed who you are inside." He thought about that. About his new school, new opportunities, new responsibilities. About the kids who looked up to him now, the adults who listened to him. "Maybe that's the point," he said. "I'm the same person. People just see me now. Really see me." They reached their building. Soon they'd move to a better apartment. But for now, this was home. Mr. Rodriguez's grandkids ran out to greet them, wearing "Be Like Jordan" t-shirts the community had designed. His phone buzzed one more time. Mrs. Martinez, thank you. Not just for saving me that day, for showing us all how to be better. Jordan looked at his mom, at the kids, at their changing neighborhood. One choice, one moment of courage, and a whole world of change. 2 months after the Manhole incident, Jordan walked the Manhattan streets near First Manhattan Bank. His school uniform was no longer stiff, his tie perfectly knotted without help. The morning sun cast long shadows between the buildings, just like that day. Jordan? Hey, Jordan? He turned to see Tommy, one of his new classmates, waving from his father's car. See you at debate practice. Jordan waved back, smiling. 2 months ago, these same streets had felt hostile. Now they felt like home. His phone buzzed, a message from Mrs. Martinez. In the hospital. Baby's coming. Visit later. He texted back quickly. Wouldn't miss it. Another message popped up. This one from Officer Rodriguez. Kids asking when you're coming back to speak at the youth center. The corner where it all happened looked different now. The manhole cover was new, secured with extra safety features. A small plaque had been installed nearby. On this spot, an 11-year-old boy showed us that courage knows no age and character knows no color. The Jordan Taylor Foundation, he stopped to look at it like he did most mornings. A woman walking past recognized him. Oh my goodness, you're him. My daughter did her school project about you. Would you mind? Jordan? His mom's voice carried from the bank entrance. She stood in her assistant manager's suit, recently promoted. The security guard, Mike, held the door for her with a smile. Mrs. Taylor, looking sharp. Inside, the bank hummed with morning activity. Jordan followed his mom to her office. She had an office now, with a window. Baby, look at this. She handed him a letter. The Jordan Taylor Foundation letterhead showed a simple logo, a manhole cover transformed into a rising sun. Dear Jordan, he read aloud. We are pleased to report that the foundation has funded its 100th scholarship. Students from across the city are receiving opportunities they never thought possible. All because you chose to act that day. His mom wiped her eyes. Keep reading. Furthermore, the Foundation's community programs have led to a 40% reduction in reported racial profiling incidents. Police departments nationwide have requested our training program. And most importantly, people are really talking about change. A knock at the door. Mr. Chin stood there, beaming. Ready for the big announcement? Jordan nodded. They've been planning this for weeks. In the bank's main lobby, cameras were set up. Reporters checked microphones. And standing together were faces from every part of Jordan's journey. His new classmates, his old neighbors, police officers, bank employees, community leaders. Mr. Chin approached the podium. 2 months ago, a boy's courage changed our community. Today, we're taking that change nationwide. The Jordan Taylor Foundation is expanding to 50 cities with a $100 million commitment to education, community programs, and social change. Applause filled the lobby. Jordan's mom squeezed his hand. And to lead this initiative, Mr. Chun continued, we've assembled a youth council. Because young voices matter. Because change starts with seeing each other clearly. And who better to chair this council than the young man who showed us the way? More applause. Jordan stepped forward, no longer nervous in front of crowds. 2 months ago, I stood on these streets feeling invisible, he began. People saw what they expected to see. But one moment changed that. One choice to do what's right. He looked at his mom, standing tall and proud. Now I walk these same streets and feel seen. Really seen. And I see others too, kids with dreams, communities with potential, people ready for change. His phone buzzed again. A picture from Mrs. Martinez, her newborn daughter, tiny and perfect. This foundation isn't about me, Jordan continued. It's about all of us. About choices we make every day. About seeing past assumptions. About doing what's right, no matter what. Later, in Mrs. Martinez's hospital room, Jordan held baby Elena, named after that day, that choice, that moment of change. She'll grow up in a different world, Mrs. Martinez said softly. Because of you. Because of all of us, Jordan corrected. Everyone who chose to change. That evening, walking home with his mom, Jordan stopped at the manhole corner one last time. The plaque caught the setting sun. You know what's funny? His mom said. What? That day, you were just trying to help one person. You weren't thinking about changing the world. Jordan nodded. Sometimes the biggest changes start small, with one choice. One moment, his phone buzzed with messages. Youth council meeting tomorrow. Debate team needs you. Speaking at another police training. Foundation launch in Chicago next week. But the message that meant the most was from a kid he'd never met, somewhere across the country. People used to cross the street when they saw me. Today, I helped an old lady with her groceries. She smiled and said thank you. I thought of you. Thank you for showing us that doing what's right matters more than what people might think. Jordan looked at his mom, at their city, at their changing world. One boy, one choice, one moment of courage, and a future full of possibilities.